Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. We have no idea what happened, but technology provides solutions. Sometimes solution is the problem, and we couldn't go live, and we couldn't understand why. But we made it, and we're here. We're actually very happy to have you here again for this week again. Walkthroughs for walkthroughs. Walkthroughs is an online series of events, and our response to the current chaotic situation with like museum implementing large layoffs, galleries canceling shows, and foreseeing closure, art fairs being postponed. We've been reflecting on the best response to the current situation, and walkthroughs is what we envision. And walkthroughs is just is a VR artistic experience is what we envision, and that is artists that every week put the headset on, share the screen, and walk us through their VR work, with curators engaging in a conversation with them. It's absolutely fantastic to see how successful this series has been so far and well received by the press and our audience and following. Thank you very much from Synthesis. We really appreciate it. If you wish so, you can watch again the previous walkthroughs on our Facebook page or YouTube. We couldn't be more pleased and really happy to announce a new series of walkthroughs next week. We will also stay tuned through our social media channels for updates. You can find us on Facebook, the Facebook ID Synthesis VR, or on Instagram at synthesis.gallery. Now, I'm really happy to have next to meet you friends and amazing representatives of the VR scene. And I truly mean it. What John Büyükberber and Just Damiani have accomplished is truly remarkable, and I couldn't be more honored to be with you today for the third act of walkthroughs. I will let me briefly introduce them. John Büyükberber is an artist that creates immersive audiovisual experiences embodied in physical and digital spaces. His projects consist of experiments with various media such as VR, AR, project mapping, large-scale displays, and digital fabrication. John is driven by an interdisciplinary thinking and curiosity that extends to the art, design, and science. Büyükberber's work often focuses on human perception, exploring new methods for nonlinear narratives and geometrical order. Giuseppe Damiani is a deputy director of emerging technology at Southern New Hampshire University, a Forbes contributor and editor at large at VR Scout. He's the curator of the XR for Change Summit, curatorial advisor at Currents New Media, and curator at the forthcoming Next Museum. He curated a spatial reality exhibition at Space Gallery and co-curated virtual features with LA and SimCinema with Float. Who is speaking? I'm George Vitale. I'm a creative director and exhibition maker based in Berlin. My projects evolves around the role and influence of technology on society through the lens of art and the eyes of the artist. In 2017, I founded Synthesis, which is a first of its kind VR-based experimental art gallery located in Berlin. We are driven by a strong interdisciplinary approach. Therefore, pieces are displayed through different media, tangible and traditional art forms intermingle with Oculus and Vive headset. I would like to briefly introduce the structure of the talk and provide the audience with like a quick overview. So we will start off with a presentation by John about the work that is today presented, but also with an overview of his body of work. After the presentation, we will have the walkthrough of John's piece today that is presented today, called Mediated Virtuality, and then we will welcome and answer any questions from the audience. Feel free to leave your questions for the panelists in the comment section here on Facebook. I will make sure to check the chat regularly, and I think we're all set for the start. John, shall we begin? By all means. It's my pleasure. John, is there? Can you check your? There is no sound. Can you?
Oh, I'm getting sound from him. Yeah, George, perhaps you're. Yeah.
Can you hear us? I'm asking the audience, the public. Can you guys hear us? Okay. Also, okay. So Wendy says she can hear Jessa Damiani. Okay, says we. Okay, so John, the problem is with you. Can you check on your hand because they can hear me and Jesse, but they cannot hear you. Yeah. I guess the problem must be with OBS.
Hi, hello, test, test, test. It should, I guess it should work right now because I can see in
Yeah.
OBS. Yeah.
Can you guys hear
Hey.
John? Okay.
Hello. Hi. Hey. Test. Test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I can see in OBS the mic is
There's
reacting.
there's no audio.
I think it's working in Facebook.
Okay,
Yeah,
now they can hear you. Now they can hear you, John.
Works?
Please go. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
More technical difficulties.
God, never stopping.
Yeah. Okay.
Never stopping.
So the part you didn't hear, I said I'm using the software for the first time. Please excuse us if anything goes wrong. So that was the part it went wrong. Now, now hopefully it's gonna work. Yeah, I was just briefly before I was just showing my work briefly if our viewers are not familiar with it right now. So okay. I like George said, I guess you heard him. I'm an artist working with digital media and I create immersive installations and my work is generally is an exploration and experiments within the intersection of art and technology and design. And I tend to use different technologies to create different types of audiovisual immersive experiences. So sometimes I use projection tools on architecture. Sometimes I work with geodesic domes. I create 360 experiences. Sometimes I can use same kind of experiences inside the VR. And I'm always intrigued by new technologies like AR, VR, and all sorts of like digital fabrication and sensors. So, and also I like generating forms and inspired by nature, physics, higher dimensional geometries, and I like bringing those forms into different spaces and media. So in general, I think my work um, is is an is an experiment exploring the intersection between different spaces. So in general, this virtual space and physical space analogy works well, literally, and also if we think about our internal experiences and external experiences, or the computer world and the physical world, or our dreams and fantasies, and our mindscape, and the physical, tangible 3D reality. So I'm trying to bring artifacts from each world to the other. So a physical experimentation can influence a digital asset, or I can try to bring a digital entity into our 3D space using 3D printers, or I can externalize my internal experiences, like my dreams, or out of sometimes out of body experiences, or different types of different states of consciousness. So that's like the general what I do. So I'm gonna try to jump into the other selection of photos from the work I'm gonna talk about today. Um, just a second. Window capture photos. Okay, I think you guys can see it now, right?
We still see you, John. You might need to do a separate screen share.
Transition. Do you see domes and virtual reality? No.
Doms, yes.
Yeah.
I see
Okay, it updated. Okay. So yeah, this is just a small, a few slides from my keynote, talking about how I've started working with domes and virtual reality. So let's see. Hope it works. So this is Biosphere in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and can you see it now? Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So this was back in 2015. I visited Montreal for an performance at SAT, Society for Art and Technology. They have these immersion and experience symposiums each year, and it's a very vibrant environment where all sorts of artists and designers and scholars from immersive media get together here, and they showcase their experimental pieces and talk about new technologies. So I was there, and I was super intrigued by their permanent dome installation over there. It uses, I guess, 12 or 16 permanently installed projectors. So it's kind of like a VR experience, but it's a communal experience where everybody can enter to that virtual space. It's an amazing environment, and Biosphere in Montreal was built by architect Buckminster Fuller, who influenced me big time. I'm a big admirer of his ideas. And we see here Allegra Fuller, his daughter, who is also a scholar. And that day, during the opening of Immersion Experience Symposium, she was talking about her father and how he came up with the idea of geodesic domes, inspired by carbon atoms, and then his ideas of synergy and spaceship Earth and all these amazing concepts. And it was a super inspiring moment for me. We were within this dome structure, and I was just imagining it like a kinetic sculpture, moving and doing these impossible movements, basically. So I was super intrigued by it. And that was the time I moved to the US for my master studies at SFAI San Francisco Art Institute. So creating an immersive piece for domes and virtual reality was something I had in mind. I was more exploring about the topic, and this book from 70s by media theorist Gene Youngblood became a big another resource material for me. Strangely, it was also the foreword was by Buckminster Fuller himself, and in this book, Gene Youngblood literally prophesizing the world we're living in right now, how the future of cinema is going to be more sensory experiences and less about drama and narratives, but more of synergetic form, a mix, new media between music and abstract visuals and technology. He was talking about holography and how the future of audiovisual experiences will be more immersive and surrounding, and so on. So it was a super inspiring book. So the first piece that I've created for domes and virtual reality, inspired by all this material and Buckminster Fuller and Gene Youngblood, was this piece called Morphogenesis, which consists of different abstract spaces inspired by how organisms develop their shape by following certain geometrical principles. And we can see those geometrical principles in nature in micro scales or macro scales. So this was my attempt to visualize that processes and build an experience by flying through these different immersive spaces and different audio environments as well. So one cool thing about this was something I discovered before these kind of experiences. I was doing more site-specific architectural installations, and you're working for 3 months, 4 months for a single experience, and after the screening is done, you can't really show that piece again because it is specifically generated for that piece of architecture. But with domes and VR, I've been exploring as this new media. I was able to just send these pieces all over the world and screen it in different places at the same time. If they don't have a dome, I can send these, VR content, and they can showcase it. Or I also use these kind of panoramic displays. This is literally the tiled content of that 360 visual, which is called equirectangular. So in a single frame, you have all 360 angles, and it basically wraps around a sphere, and you see that either in VR or Dome. It's the same thing. So it was super inspiring to get feedback from this experience, and I'm gonna play a small 1 minute teaser from it. Okay, so this I did this during my first year of my grad studies, and it received a really well feedback. And I was also exploring the whole vibrant VR scene in California, and I guess that's where I meet Jesse as well. There is a lot going on, and there was a big hype around VR. And I remember I attended this Vision Summit in 2016, and HTC just gave us all these VR headsets for free, and we received it, before it was released to public. And so I said I must do something for uh, this interactive VR headset. And then this is the second year of my grad studies, and this is kind of like my grad show piece as well. And my intention, and I was invited to this amazing artist residency at Autodesk's Pier 9 workshop. It is a digital fabrication facility, and they provide artists software workshops, classes for these machinery and software they have. And they have amazing 3D printers, CNC machinery, laser cutters, wood workshop, a metal workshop. So it's like a dream workshop environment basically for artists like us. And you can literally build a car or a tank in that workshop, and they're just expecting us to build, to experiment with their tools over there. And I was completely free to do whatever I want within that 3-4 months. And this was a great opportunity to build my new piece, basically. So this is a room from San Francisco Mint, where SFAI had their grad exhibition in. I had this beautiful room, and my intention was exploring more deeply how the relationship between physical and digital space. And I was intending to build a physical installation, basically map the room inside the VR, place the same sculptures inside the VR as well, and allow people to have an experience in between these physical, the real in between reality virtuality continuum, basically. Um, I was inspired by bringing a new way to showcase VR pieces in gallery setting, because most of the time the headset, the tech is highlighted, but we have no idea about what's going on inside the experience. And also because most of the time just a single person can experience the VR piece, there's a long line. People are waiting, sometimes losing their interest to experience the piece. So my intention was to start the experience before they're in VR, and enjoy the gallery space, the prints, the sculptures, and everything, and the sound as well. But when they're within VR with the headset, they are having an enhanced experience of the space. So I began to, inspired by that morphogenesis process, I began to create different sculptural ideas, and what kind of physicality I can bring to VR. And at the same time, HTC again announced their Vive trackers. So this was another cool piece of equipment that I wanted to use, because I want to bring physicality. I want to bring physical interaction, and I don't want to just stuck. I don't want to be limited by the use of controllers. And this was a great way to just put any object into VR and have them tracked inside the virtual space. So these are some of the sculptures that I produced. You see, a mix between organic shapes and what I say transcendental objects. So I was acting like I'm bringing these higher dimensional objects to our 3D reality. It's something impossible. You can't really we can't really comprehend how the four-dimensional space works, but there are some projections in 2D and 3D space, and I was inspired by those geometries. And also the cool connection between bringing something from fourth to third dimension, and also bringing something from virtual to physical, and also again interacting with that physical, but it triggers the VR experience as well. So it was a literal combination of all these, like clashing realities or spaces. Uh, so this is how it looked like. I had this table in the room. I placed all my sculptural objects on that table and the VR headset as well. And I also had several different prints on the walls, so it was already like a gallery experience without the VR. And I also used projection mapping on these prints, and there was this sound piece and the other objects as well. And then I mapped this whole room in VR with the exact same dimensions. I placed the objects at the exact right places. All these sculptures, and also these 2D prints on the walls. They are, 3D rendering. So I already had the 3D assets of these pieces, and I placed them in 3 dimensions into the VR space as well. Actually, now I'm thinking like this could be a better AR experience, without all the fuss about the VR stuff. But at the time, it wasn't that popular yet, so that these are the tools that I had. Um, another thing also I realized, um, while you're interacting with the sculptures, if you don't see your hands, some sort of interaction is still missing. And I used leap motion sensor for that, where we can just see our hands in the VR as well. So it somehow completed the experience, and it was a lot of people's first time in VR. And there is already a wow factor just putting the headset on. But as they had this also physical interaction with the space as well, it was a really interesting, rich sensory experience for them. So before I go to Unity, I want to show you guys. I have one of the sculptures here. You can see it in detail. And this is the vibe tracker, um, which allows the lighthouses to see the object in space.
Hey, John, maybe stop sharing your screen so that people can see it full screen.
Sure. But the thing is, this is all going in OBS right now, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not
Yeah,
gonna
I mean,
be
it still
able
comes
to,
up.
yeah, really do that. Sorry, guys.
Whoops.
Yeah, but here is some details. This is another
It's
smaller test
Yeah,
piece.
and just to clarify why I wanted people to, I mean, hopefully people will go find you, but the texture on these, like what I've loved about your 3D printing work is just the texture is so rich, and it kind of moves away from some of the 3D prints that just feel, super resiny. Like you've used really fascinating materials in your printing.
Yeah, I mean, thanks to Autodesk, these were really expensive materials. And for instance, this took like 80 hours to print. This was a cheaper PLA material, but this one is my favorite. It's like a um, glass material. It's super high res. You can't really see the steps. Um, and I remember because we were um, keeping lists of all these materials and stuff. I guess this material was around like $2,000, just the material cost. So it was a great
which
opportunity to
which
just
is
experiment with all these expensive
which is
equipment.
by the way the background that people can see
Yeah, yeah,
behind the
cool.
beautiful sculpture, like beautifully shaped.
Yeah. So, do you guys want to talk about before we jump into Unity, or should we
Yeah,
just
no,
do that?
let's actually jump on Unity so we can
Okay.
like start like the talk and ask questions. Yeah.
Hope this works too. Okay. I think you should be able to see the setup right now. Can you confirm?
Can you share the screen, John?
Yeah, it's just taking a second. It's a little bit of a delay in Facebook.
Now I can see it. On
Yeah,
Facebook,
you can
so.
see. Okay, so so unfortunately, guys, this is a pretty old build, and because I have all these, stuff for the equipment, I wasn't really able to update everything, so it kind of works weird. It's not exactly the way it looked back then, but you can see here all those same sculptures, like the physical space, and also I've placed these 3D versions of the prints you've seen onto the environment. And what I've added to this is more like a research piece for me. This is not like my other audiovisual work where you have this 20-minute experience. But I was keeping in mind a lot of people are gonna experience this in this space, so I wanted to give them a brief experience in VR, uh, in addition to their physical experience in the gallery space as well. So what I did was, so you enter this room, and this wireframe you see here is the exact dimensions of the room you're inside. And I just wanted to present them an enhanced virtual version of the room they're physically in. And the weird thing, people were interacting more with the table because it's a larger object, so they were going beneath it and touching it. It was just such a weird experience. They are like newborns in this virtual space, and I wanted to bring some sort of out of body experience into this. So what I did
John,
was, yeah,
can I ask you a question?
for
Is like,
sure.
because I think you are going to talk about this, but I think it's can you describe the process of actually how you moved from from like 3D printed sculptures to a spatial installation that activates the VR? Like,
Sure.
how, yeah.
So the process starts with the creation of the sculptures. Basically, I use different softwares for that. Would you like me to talk about that software process or more the
Or
conceptual
if you
approach?
could like just briefly talk about it, yes.
Sure. So basically, there's a lot of form experiments. So the first step. I'm more like a sculptor. I come up with the forms, and I have the higher resolution 3D mesh that I 3D print. So the ones that I brought into Unity here are lower density versions of that. Um, and then basically I brought all the sculptures that I have 3D printed inside the Unity, and I placed them in the exact same locations. There were two different sculptures with the vibe trackers that you can interact with. So these are the ones you can actually hold, and basically it works at the same space. The physical and the virtual is the same experience. But what I've added to this enhancement was adding this slight elevation, to the ceiling, and I've placed a much larger version of the same sculpture people were holding, like a space or like a. It's kind of like you're kidnapped by a UFO or something like that. I just wanted to add a very simple out of body experience, and people were kind of freaking out because they weren't expecting. They were interacting with the table and sculptures, and they still feel like uh, it's kind of like a video effect or something. They don't. Everybody doesn't really recognize this is they're fully inside the VR because it looks so similar to their physical experience as well. So they thought, oh, this is just kind of an effect or something. But when I started to elevate them into the ceiling inside this form, it was a completely different experience, especially for the people who were using the VR for the first time. So let me just dive into the VR right now. Oh, okay. How is the frame rate, by the way, guys?
It's pretty good.
Is
It's
it
pretty
good?
good. I'm checking. Yeah, I'm checking regularly Facebook. It's actually very good. Yeah.
Awesome. So in my work, I have this more, vector like aesthetics, which is not, which is very abstract and not super realistically rendered, but more like a graphical, you know, it has more like a graphical aesthetic like this. So I did that in here as well, um, because I don't have the actual table right now. I'm just able to show you guys like this. I can get nearby, and and my hands are here as well. And Leap Motion does an amazing job for this kind of thing. So I'm actually holding the. Can you see my camera as well? I'm actually holding the piece right now, but I can't
Yeah, yeah,
see.
we can see both.
I
We can see both.
guess it is turned off. Let me try it. Oop. So I'm turning this on right now. I think I need to pair it. Oops, I accidentally started the game here. Okay, done. Let's try it again. Wow, the tracker is here, but sculpture is not. But I guess you get the idea. So
There it is.
basic,
We can see it. We can see it again. Yeah.
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 So these forms.
John, if I could jump in,
Yes, please.
because I think you're at a spot that I think is sort of a really salient jumping off point. Because one thing that I just continually appreciate about your practice is this like totally converged, intersectional, but in terms of the technologies and the arts, approach to what these things can be. So I'm wondering, when you've shown people this, what have their responses been, in merging this, physical world with digital realities, or putting people in realities that have some bearing in the reality that they're in, but then have this abstract geometric, sky and, alien sort of lighting system? How have people responded to that?
So it's always a different experience in different locations. So it depends on the exhibiting environment. Just a second, I'm trying to find you guys. Yes. So for instance, at the SFAI grad show, I think this was the most out there technological piece, because we have more like performance artists and sculptors and classic painter friends. So it was more like a contemporary art show, in which where they see this super weird, technologically advanced thing for the first time. So it was a complete alien experience for a lot of the audiences, But
Mm,
not just the aesthetics or the sculptures. When they enter to this VR space, it is a completely different experience too, because for a lot of people, like I said, if they never experience VR, there is still a wow factor. But most of the time, they are trying to understand like what is really going on here. Am I look? Because their hands over there as well. They see the same
yeah, yeah.
table. So, for instance, they thought, if I move the table, is it gonna move here as well? Because they didn't know the difference between that VR setup and the physical setup. So, but I guess because there is all these things that you can't really analyze at the moment, there is this mind-blowing effect of, wow, I'm experiencing this is, I mean, the special thing for me was giving people an experience for the first time in their life, that is something you can't really do in our time anymore, because
Totally.
that was really fulfilling. Another thing that I really
Totally.
and I a feedback I received, and it inspired my following work. Um, they found themselves in sort of meditative spaces, because it is a
Mm.
lot like a psychedelic experience as well. So surprising thing for me, after just having a few minutes of these technological experience, the next moment when they come outside of VR, we are in deep conversations about the nature of reality and how the mind works and consciousness expansion and all that topics. So it is really fun and fulfilling to have those kind of feedback immediately, but not after like an hour of conversation.
Totally. Well, one thing that's so funny is your work is so precise, but you're kind of a far out dude. Like even coming in on this discussion with expanded cinema, like that comes from the counterculture of the 70s.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, in doing this work and making this work, and you referenced like the fourth dimension while while you were doing your walkthrough. Have you noticed that making this work has changed how you think or perceive space, or embody the artistic potential of space?
I mean, definitely, definitely, because we are visual creatures, and just like machine learning algorithms, we learn from the memories or visual experiences we have, and somehow our minds are sorting all these different experiences. And something we were talking about with my friend, you see these sort of experiences more in your dreams after you experience this kind of VR stuff, because now it is encoded in your memory as well, and you have this example visual space. So when your mind generates dream spaces, they are inspired by VR experiences. So it is a complete, mind blower to notice that
Totally.
kind of stuff. And also, I mean, the more time you spend in VR, especially when you're developing not just experience the experience, but when you're developing, you're tweaking a lot of the stuff. And I'm sure it happens to all these people, like all sorts of people who works with VR. When you come back to physical reality, it kind of feels like a VR experience as well, because we have a gyro in our brain, and or in inner ear, whatever. We have these two sensory organs. It generates the same way a computer graphics card generates the virtual spaces. So it
Totally.
changes how you look at work. Totally.
Totally. I'm not sure if you saw this, but Nick Madison a few months ago posted a video that went viral of him and his Quest. He had basically mapped his lived environment onto his Quest. Did you see this video?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. That reminds me a lot of your work, and I just wonder, like, are you thinking about the ways, particularly with the pandemic, how your sort of sense of merging the physical and the digital might change how we relate to like our interior spaces, our intimate, our rooms, our offices, our homes?
I mean, totally. This is something we were discussing earlier together, guys. All the people who are working in this field are always sharing their future projections about how the life is going to be with these technologies. But like we were talking about, maybe in 2030s or whatever. But suddenly this pandemic happens, and we can't literally go outside, and all the communication tools, all the projects we're doing, social interactions, everything is performed in the virtual space. So we really need, in this type of setting, the spatial interaction and display technologies, because we can't. I mean, Zoom for the moment is fine. We can see our facial gestures and expressions, and we can hear ourselves with mics, but we are totally missing much bigger physical presence. And how our physical presence and all our gestures and body language also transmits much more information than our facial gestures. I think we need
Totally.
it now more than ever. I guess this is going to even more justify the need for these type of immersive media.
John, if
Totally.
I like according to what you just said, do you believe in the future, like there will be, we'll see, sort of like an increase in the unification between virtual and real spaces in light of what you just said? And
Yeah, I mean that's what everybody says in the field right now because these are, I mean, not just the VR and AR part of our reality, but these devices are everyday component right now. We really need these devices, but the interaction between that information system, between our brain and the system, is just this 2D display. But these new technologies and gaming engines and VR and AR mixed reality technologies are enabling the spatial computing. So exactly the way we interact with our physical spaces. So I think it seems to me inevitable the
beautiful.
merging of those two spaces.
And if I can ask you again, if we've seen that like throughout your body of work, there is something that is that is present, which is this like how you engage with like architecture and space. You've worked, as we've seen, like with domes and spatial installations. I was just wondering where this fascination for immersive experiences comes from, because I've been talking like as someone who runs a VR gallery. I mean, I talk to artists, and every time I get I get different answer. So I'm actually curious, where does this fascination for like architecture and space and come from?
I think it definitely comes from. So I'm gonna explain this, but I'm just trying to tweak this OBS setup right now, so we can have more visual in the background. Sorry, or maybe I can just make this full screen now. The Zoom setup, so we can talk more freely. Okay, I think it's gonna work now. Transition. So we should be full screen now. So the yeah, that's a great question for sure. I was always fascinated with cinema, and I was an aspiring director. And during my design studies in undergrad, I studied visual communication design, and that was the first time I started exhibiting my digital pieces. So projectors came first, and putting the projectors in gallery, and the 3D animation and motion picture and abstract forms displayed in spaces became something to consider about, And at the time, projection mapping was really booming all around the world, especially in Europe, in light festivals and mapping festivals. A lot of architectural installations were becoming available for artists like me. I remember the first time I actually did my first projection mapping exhibition in Cologne in Germany. And I mapped a simple chair, and I actually mapped its shadow, and shadow was duplicating and making all these different stuff. So once I did that, it just you just get the idea of, oh, like there are infinite possibilities here. You can bring anything from digital world and physical world using this technology, and then one wall and three walls and architectural facades. It just and I did some aniglyph 3D work as well on the architecture. But despite the installations were huge and architectural, it wasn't still really immersing you. So when I experienced a dome environment for the first time, I knew this was the ultimate tool to create immersive experiences. And then VR came hand to hand with dome content creation.
Yeah, it's sort of like domes allow you to really share in the immersive experience, but often lack the interactivity and intimacy of what you get in headsets. One thing that I want to pick up on in there is like when you're talking about this chair, I was thinking about one thing that you do that I really like is you bring a really organic touch to sort of all of your work that I've encountered. There's something organic about it, even though it's decidedly digital. So I feel like there's an assumption that like the digital cannot be natural. And I'm thinking about dome environments and projections that sort of make you feel more somehow involved in the natural world. How are you thinking about, and like in what ways can immersive arts, can the immersive arts bring us a sense of the natural and the organic?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's about the materiality of the digital media because, for instance, if a sculptor works with wood, that is your material, and you utilize what a wood can or can't, or when you're working metal, you're bringing that tangible material qualities into the work itself. And I think when the computer graphics first came about, we were trying to imitate photorealistic imagery like Jurassic Park and dinosaurs and cars and all that kind of realistic stuff. But I think over time, when people who are working with computer graphics find their own, free, independent environment, they began to experiment with the digital material itself. And I think the low poly aesthetics and particles and different ways of shading things, it just created its own aesthetics, which I really find beautiful. And also, if you just look at it from a minimal, yeah, abstraction and minimalism point as well, how you can really generate something out of nothing within the with the minimum amount of things you can, so a pyramid is uh, the simplest shape that can exist in three dimensions. So I think it starts from there and builds its own aesthetics. But also now with 3D scanning and scanning nature, we can really bring, like with photogrammetry and stuff like that, we can bring more influence from nature itself, and and I think it captures an amazing complexity, but we can still add this digital touch. So I feel like as all these communications are happening more and more in virtual spaces, we are generating this whole new world, and I think it gives us artists and designers a chance to decide or experiment, explore how this reality is going to look like, because it's obvious that we don't have to duplicate the way things look like in the real world, but we can just
Mm,
free our imaginations and be the architects of this new, environment.
boom. I love
Um,
that quote. All right, I'm gonna throw one more question to
sorry,
you, and then
sorry,
probably send it over to the audience. Oh, what's that?
just 1 second. I just wanted to remind everyone to, if you have any questions for us, for the panelists, please feel free to drop it in the comment section on Facebook. I'm checking it regularly. Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, good. Yeah, John has lots of great things to share. So definitely everybody watching live, this is a good chance. My final question for you is just more tactical, kind of based on what you were saying just a second ago, where we have all these new tools now, and it's often hard for artists to kind of determine what tool to use um, to portray whatever the sort of concept that is sort of itching and burning at you. How you've done a really good job, John, translating across, from dome to VR, but also in between to equirectangular, both projection maps, but then also just sort of looped video, and drawing people in and across sort of the board. How do you think about doing that, and how might you help? Like, what is some advice you could give to other artists who are thinking, I'd really love to make something, but there's a pretty small install base for VR, and I'd love to kind of put my time into making something that can live, across the, deployments of dome, VR headset, projection map, what have you.
Yeah, I mean, something I feel like, there are usually two types of people. Some people are super advanced with, dealing with computers and softwares and, coding and the tech side of things. And there are people who are maybe more removed from that world and likes tangible stuff and painting, sculpting, all the traditional art making tools. I feel like, I mean, my perspective totally changed when I moved to San Fran and start to work within a workshop environment, and I feel like
Mm.
my digital art even more improved after I started to work with real materials, because there is something like literally real there, that it doesn't exist in the virtual world, and we can learn a lot from it because it's a rich sensory experience, right? Because you hold stuff, you feel it, and there's a lot of juice in there in that experience. And I think there's a lot we can bring into the digital space from those experiences. So I really value the, if you want to do something with a computer, start doing it without a computer first. You don't, because a
Mm.
lot of the times, especially the first group of people I mentioned, the more techie people, they got caught up in those like softwares or sensors or updates or the newest tool and the next big thing, whatever, that kind of, and I think it just damages the flow of the creative process. But I feel like an idea can really start in your head, and then you can translate it into drawings and sketches, and then and once you know what you're talking about, what you want to show, what's the experience like, what do you want people to feel, then it is a digital translation process. And I feel
Mm.
like with new like gaming engines like Unity and Unreal. I mean, these are free software. You can just download it and use, and there is like infinite amount of tutorials online that people can find, which wasn't really available when we were kids. These were super expensive software, and there were no internet.
Mm.
And I feel like they can just start, like I said, with the traditional ways of creativity and start to find ways to translate it into digital space.
Mm. So literally like picking up objects or sketching something out, or even just talking something through, putting it in a Google Doc, like that type of stuff.
Exactly, because you're creating something from nothing, and you need something, and how is it going to look like? We tend to, when we're creating experiences, we tend to um mimic what we consume the most, aesthetically. But it doesn't have to be that way. Your tree can be different than my tree. Your apple can look like different from my Apple. I really value. I think especially for this kind of very very expressive media, we can literally enhance the way we look. For instance, with the AR filters and stuff like that. There is a lot of personal expression we can bring into our creations, and I think
Mm.
that uniqueness makes something really special. Not really replicating someone else's reality, but you know, like externalizing your own inner experience in a way.
Mm. I think about this a lot. I'm sorry, this conversation is just so interesting to me. I think a lot about like how when I'm just waking up and I'm still kind of in this hypnagogic like dream state,
Yeah,
the things I'm thinking about are they're like images and words and something beyond, and they're both bigger and tinier than the real world. It's like, and the closest that I've gotten to that feeling is through VR experiences.
exactly. And I'm sure this really inspired all the pioneers in this field, because after you have a VR experience, and if you're familiar with hypnagogic states, you realize it's kind of like the same thing. And we literally have an internal render engine that works without any sensory input, and so, for instance, I mean, I love this conversation as well because it is super inspiring to me when we are dealing with all these like rich sensory experiences. Actually having sensory deprivation can be a super inspiring state as well. So just float. I love flotation tanks, for instance.
Mm.
Despite it is the invert of a VR experience. It really produces similar type of a sensory experience where you can bring a lot of inspiration from that deprivation into this sensory overload.
Totally, totally. George, I
Um,
know we're kind of tight on time. I want to check in with you.
yeah. We're definitely about to wrap it up. Again, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please drop it in the comment section. I would like to ask last question for me for John. So you mentioned architecture space, are intertwined in your projects with VR. And VR in a way like allows has allowed you to fulfill all the fantasies that were limited by physical reality. um I was wondering, like, how has the process of reaching these fantasies evolved? Has it remained the same? What adjustments have you made? And how do you see this going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the more you learn about stuff, it just makes you feel different about the stuff you're interested in, right? So like I when I first moved to San Francisco, I was like super how can I say, evangelistic about the whole technology and the future we're building with these technologies, because there's a lot of power, in these media and in this way of creativity. And but as I get more engaged with these tools, it kind of begins to scare you as well, because it definitely enhances our abilities, or we, but also it makes us question what is really essential about the human experience, and what do we want to keep, how much we want to evolve, because all these tools within the world of right now, and brain computer interface, it's going to enable us to have these experiences like the in replacement of the real physical sensory experience we're having right now. So there is a big question, like how much we want to keep and how much we want to evolve. And I think it's a personal preference for everyone. But I am less excited than, I feel more cautious now, because I think imagination is more limitless when you just fantasize about stuff which can really happen. But when we now know it can really happen, it puts you in a different state,
We have a question from the people in attendance. Wendy is asking, what are your upcoming projects? If you have something in the works, and of course, if you could, like, tell the audience how they can keep up with, and stay updated with your work via, website, I guess, and social media.
Yeah. So, I mean, after the stuff that I showed, after these experiences, I became more interested in the meditation side of this stuff, because I've been receiving a lot of feedback about, how calming can this be, how, stress reducing qualities it has. So I spent some time actually last year working on these type of like guided meditation experiences for those with a group of people in New York. It is still going on. And I also built another installation in New York in a space called Zero Space. It is a big immersive experience museum in New York. So those experiences are still going on, not right now because of the pandemic, but they're installed over there, so people over there can experience it. And also on my social accounts, if they just type my name, they can find my pages. I usually share a lot about my process. Actually, sometimes I'm opening up, my creation processes as well, and I send some iterations and I receive feedback. And sometimes, I mean, it can become like a crowdsourced creative process as well. I really like that. But and I spent some time in nature last year in Hawaii, and I was super into photography, and just photographing landscapes and the ocean, and more photography stuff. So I think those like recent experiences are going to inform my new projects that are more inspired by those meditative states and photorealistic nature elements in it, and somewhere around those lines. Maybe removing myself a little bit more from this, abstract, super computer graphic looking world into something different.
April is asking, is there anything coming up in Los Angeles?
In Los Angeles,
Yes.
not. I mean, we're talking
Where
about.
Jesse is, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm in Turkey right now, and the international flights are canceled. So when it becomes available, it just pauses a lot of the stuff that was happening. But hopefully it can probably in the new year, I suppose. In 2021.
All right, guys, we reached the end. We made it regardless of the technical difficulties, and I couldn't be more like happier. I wanted to thank you very, very much, John, and of course, Jesse. I
Thank you,
think
George.
it was a very inspiring, insightful conversation. Thank you for joining Walkthroughs for Synthesis. We will announce a new series of walkthroughs next week. So as I said at the beginning, stay in touch via our social media for upcoming announcement. And yeah, thank you very much again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
George.
everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks a
George.
lot,
Thanks,
Jesse.
John.
Thank you.